I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Thursday, March 30th, 2023. And I've got a great program today. A lot of serious things to talk about, some fun things to talk about as well. I want to jump right in, though, with my first guest. And she's a leader in the community, a thought leader, and a guiding light in capturing, promoting books, book writing, book producing, literature, and a guiding light in education as well. Rekhet Si-Asar is here. Rekhet, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And thank you for those beautiful words. I
Well,
appreciate it.
always good to be with you. I'm inspired by you and your family, your work, your vision, and the consistency, the persistence that you bring, the dedication you have to elevating knowledge about who we are and what we stand for in the world, and the power that we have to shape futures that reflect our dignity and our possibilities, that allow them to continue to materialize, to self-actualize. I think that's kind of the intent as I see you and your work with Black Ink, in Black Ink, and other arenas like the Sankofa series, always elevating and motivating. So respond to that. You know, am I describing you in any way that is close to being right?
Well, I appreciate all of the beautiful words and the description. I am likewise inspired by your work for all these years in holding up just holding up the idea and ideals of Black people having their own resources to actually promote their own stories, whether it be current events or events that's happening nationally, internationally, locally. I really appreciate all the work you've done over these years. It's been inspiring to watch, and I feel like my work is just to help be a small part of what you and others like you have already built. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
So talk about In Black Ink. What's the organization? What's the mission? What's been the history so far? And what's the work ahead? And in the course of this conversation, please talk about these important events that are coming up real soon here in Twin Cities.
Of course, of course. Well, In Black Ink was not my vision, but I think it's been in my DNA or in my genes in terms of the work I've been doing in community and with my family. My husband and I started a small publishing org over 20, I want to say almost 25 years ago. When we were in graduate school, we decided we needed to create our own curriculum for our children to be. We didn't have children at the time, but was expected one on the way, and wanted to make sure that the information and the knowledge and the stuff that was shared with them was accurate. And we were finding that not to be correct, both being educators. And so fast forward to 2016, we was a part of a group of consultants who came together to look at the state of Minnesota in terms of how we are capturing the stories of people of African descent, how we're sharing those stories, how we're actually, if you want to say, archiving and promoting, distributing those stories. And we found that there's no real plan that was available here for us, and our elders, as we say, are passing and transitioning every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so in keeping with the African proverb that said, when an elder dies, an entire library burns to the ground, we knew that it was an urgent call for us to really do something. And so was really pushed to the forefront. I wouldn't say I stepped into it, but I was pushed to the forefront because of the passion and the desire to really make an impact in this area. So we received funding from the Historical Society of McKnight Foundation with the help of the Humanities and the St. Paul Almanac, pursued creating In Black Ink so that we can look at an organization, a nonprofit organization that's able to provide I say resources and funding to help build the pool of people from our community that's in the publishing world. So we do, like apprenticeships, trainings, workshops in writing, editing, layout. We're in work, so a lot of those things are being uncovered, organically being uncovered as we move. And
Mhm.
so currently some of the major things that we have going on are some of the writing workshops we just finished one with the Minnesota Humanities Center for Black writers only. It was called Remembering. It was a wonderful turnout. This was the
Wow.
second one that we did in collaboration with them this year. And it just was a Black space that allowed writers of all level, beginning, middle, and end, to come together and really enjoy each other's presence.
Let me jump in. What are you discovering when things like that take place? What's the magic? I'm sure I can't imagine an assembly like that not producing magic moments.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh.
what
Yeah.
are some of the highlights?
It's the highlight for me was to see how it's almost like how thirsty and how starved our people were
Hmm.
to have a space that allows them to bring their full memory and their full selves
Hmm.
and share their full stories. A lot of times they get into writer spaces and they feel like they have to be a certain way, and
Hmm.
writer's supposed to be a kind of like a British poet, or like we have these concepts just based on how we've been trained and thought. And so sharing in that space becomes really emotional.
Hmm.
People are very yeah, it's just an emotionally charged space. People are very visceral in their feelings of how they've come to the point where they've gotten enough confidence in
Hmm.
themselves to actually even put down their stories on paper and share it with the world. And it's just beautiful to see, because I'll tell you one quick story. We had a young man that came with his girlfriend last year, and
Hmm.
last year he introduced himself and he said, yeah, I came with her, she kind of dragged me here. And this year, his introduction was like, I brought her here today because so we were coming regardless. So we saw the turnaround in terms of, that desire to find
Sure.
that space. But I think what goes deeper than that for me in terms of my realization is how damaged our concept of ourselves are in this area of writing and language.
Mhm.
A lot of us have certain dialects and just certain ways. They Ebonics was a huge thing in the 70s and 80s, and the beginning of the 90s.
Mhm.
And we think that language is not something that we can master. And so a lot of times we believe the hype that we are not our own writers. So we turn over our stuff to other people. And in the process, they edit it and they create what they want to shape. And so that's the issue that I think um, Nicole Hannah-Jones, in her introducing of the 1619 Project and sharing those stories, it kind of hits folks in the face where people are thinking that, there's certain things we don't want to have shared. But once we're in that arena, I feel like what we do is we tend to expand it to where it includes us as humans. And that's not typical for others to understand. So.
That's amazing. So much to talk about. I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane, talking with Rekhet Si-Asar. She's a principal at In Black Ink. And I love the fact that you're convening writers and having people share, but discover their power, the power that we have surrendered
Mhm.
because of lack of confidence. And I think that you are discovering that once we reawaken, reconnect, we begin to reimagine, and in imagining anew, we discover what we've always known, and that's something about brilliance, something about healing, something about a way of being that makes you uh, sort of um, appreciate your essential being. The fact that you're here, and that means something. That it means something. Not only it's not a coincidence, but integral to the existence of everything. Each
Mhm.
of us is that important. And this process, it seems to me, is one that guides writers to discover that feeling in themselves and then have the confidence to share how it appears in their life and in their story. I don't know. That's what I imagine is happening.
Exactly. I think the other thing that's happening is we're actually correcting a lot of the false narratives because we're putting forward our own, and our stories coming from us is a lot more accurate than the stories that we read. Because a lot of times we read stuff about us and we're like, huh, I don't know those Black people.
Right.
And I think we really have to start saying that loud and really, debunking the whole myth that other people know us better than we do. But yeah.
And that we have to have their approval before we begin to claim ourselves, that the selves we know too
Exactly.
often is dependent on what they will accept and what they won't accept. So we edit ourselves to fit their expectations. And in doing so, we cripple ourselves because their plan for us and their experience with us is one that empowers them and them alone.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know you asked what projects we have.
Yeah.
We are really busy, which is beautiful because it really points to the need. But we have a event coming up actually on Monday evening. Michelle Norris, who is no stranger to Minnesota, most people might know her as the journalist, author. She calls herself an instigator and a columnist, who was on CNN and NPR. She did the politically considered segment of NPR. Will be here on Monday in an evening with Michelle Norris. She's doing the second segment of our event that you actually keynoted this past fall, Perilous Times, Defending and Defining the Spirit of Black Media. She'll be talking from her perspective as a national correspondent, like what her experience has been, what are some of the things she think our community might not know about the media, and just generally how the role the media plays in our understanding of who different peoples are, specifically our people, because the images that are created from the stories we hear on the 6 o'clock and the 10 o'clock news really stick, and people use those to motivate their interaction or, the level of engagement with us. And I think George Floyd's experience was one based on the fact that, these implicit bias that exist in these different organizational structures based on these images that's been painted about who we are. So I would love to hear, what she has to say. She'll be there with us from 6 to 8 at the University of Minnesota, who's our partner and have generously assisted with making sure this event happens. So I think I gave the time. We would love if people can register and join us. It's a limited number because the theater is not that large. I think we only go up to like maybe about 300. So the registration has been coming in, and we want to encourage people to just come out and support the one Black professor, faculty member that's at the University of Minnesota that was really instrumental in helping us make this connection, Dr. Daniel Brown, who also is one who's been looking at the impact of the media and how it actually provides us with trusted sources of information.
And she's great. She's really superb as an educator, teacher, leader, and just as a human being, just wonderful, wonderful. Well, listen, speaking of education, you are also an educator, and I wanted to, before you leave, have you talk about your concern as a school psychologist, as one of about 50 or so in the St. Paul school system, with the most recent and tragic incidences in Nashville, the death of 6 people, 3 of whom were children, at the hands of a person who's experiencing mental health issues, and the ramifications of it, not only in the lives of those individual people who lost their lives and all the children and moms and dads and parents, teachers around them, the trauma that they will live with for a long time, and the national trauma. But this tape I have sort of elevates that to the national discussion. Let's listen to this. It's maybe 4 or 5 minutes long. Listen to part of it, not all of it, and let's get your reaction. And then after that, I'm going to say goodbye to you and thank you for being here, and bring in my other guests to continue the conversation about this video on the question of violence, gun violence.
Freaking cowards. They're gutless. They're not here. I'm talking about gun violence.
You know, there's never been.
I'm talking about gun violence.
In a school that allows teachers to carry.
Carry guns? You think more guns lead to more death? More guns lead to more death. Look at the data. You're not looking at any data. You're carrying the water for the gun lobby.
No.
Look at the data. More guns lead to more deaths. States that have open carry laws have more deaths.
In every school
States that have open carry laws have more deaths.
There's never been a shooting.
Are you listening to what I'm saying?
Yeah, calm down.
Calm down. Children are dying.
I know, I've got
9-year-old children. The solution is not arming teachers. Have you ever worked in a school? 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 It's a yes or no question. Have you ever worked in a school? You will not answer my question. Don't stop and talk to me. Okay, I'll bring it down a notch. Have you ever worked in a school?
I've got a bill to repeal.
I worked in the school for 20 years. I was a team. I was speaking before you came and interrupted me. I worked in the school for 20 years. I worked in school 20 years. I was a teacher. I was a school counselor. I was a middle school principal. I was in cafeterias, protecting kids every day of my career. Proud. He can't even answer a yes or no question. Answer. Why would they pass legislation? Why? Answer the question. Ask him right now. Make him answer.
Wow. That's interesting. And the dynamic is what's interesting, how Congressman Jamaal Bowman was challenging other Congress people about the Republicans in particular inability to have a discussion about gun violence. What's your thought about that discussion, first of all, but speak about the experience of last week and beyond with what's happened in Nashville. As a school psychologist, what's happening?
I think in that role in the schools, face to face with young children, I think throughout the years, I've been in elementary all the way through transitional programs, post high school age, with children of all ages, actually. And the response is the same by the children. There's high levels of anxiety that's incurred by students and parents because of the lack of safety. For a long time, schools used to profess that they were the safest place for students. Even if, they might live in a rough neighborhood, they can come to school and they're safe there. That's not the case. And it's gotten to where, I totally agree with the level of intensity that our congressman is bringing, because the conversation needs to be elevated. We can't have a quiet backroom conversation about how to approach gun violence when our children are dying. And so I'm just really saddened. It was a really sad week. I also serve on a mental health team at one of my schools, and the social workers, psychologists, counselors, nurse, all of the people on that team were all we're almost at the place where we're all so paralyzed in terms of what's the next step, because we know what's being proposed is not really the answer, or at least an answer that would assist us in making real moves. One thing I wanted to say is I did go back and look up some of the international numbers, And when you look at, I think in 20, I think it was a 2009 to 2018 study, they found that in the US, we had over 288 school-related shootings. And in the next largest amount was 8 in Mexico. So from 288, from 2018, I mean 2009 to 2018, we had 288 school shootings in the US. In Mexico, they had 8 at that time. And since then, we've had in the last, 2018, in the last 6 years, 5 years, we've had, I think, an additional 7 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just real. It really speaks to the fact that as a nation that claims to be a developed nation, a nation that has civilized ways of really are behind internationally in our approach to human fight.
I think
Really
our signal is
admire the
degrading.
situation as our.
Yeah, I think our signal is degrading. I want to thank you, Sister Rekhet, for being here. We'll remind people again about registering and how they can get to the event coming up next week to hear.
Thank you. Yes, my
our dear
signal
sister
is
Michelle Norris.
looking
Yeah.
like it's.
And,
Thank you,
and,
Brother Al. Thank you to your team, and I appreciate this time to speak with you.
Great. Thank you, too. Let me keep moving because we were losing our signal with Sister Rekhet as well. So that must have been the Spirit saying, time for her to go, because she's got more people waiting for her to get prepared for this important event coming up in a few days. Let me bring in 2 more of my colleagues, though, to just spend some more time on that video we just watched. Joining me again from Bahia, Brazil, Mestre Yoji Sena, and joining me from St. Paul, from the Martin Luther King Center, Allie Q. Brown, CEO and President Jonathan Palmer. Jonathan, Yoji, good afternoon, brothers. Good to see you.
Good afternoon.
Let me just get your gut reaction to that video we watched a second ago. Jonathan, you first, and then Yoji.
I have one very powerful for the brother to be out there and calling out the truth like that. It is fascinating to look at the response. You know, we're going through this banning books and banning who reads them to protect kids, but we won't ban guns or put in more registration regulation to protect that. And the falsehood of the other gentleman who came by and said that there has never been a school shooting in schools that arm teachers. Well, there's over 115,000 schools in the U.S. There's been 376 school mass shootings since Columbine. So it's the equivalent of saying there's never been a mass shooting in a school with an ice cream machine. So it's a false statement. It distracts from the actual argument, which is it's not side doors, it's not books, it's guns that are creating the problem.
That brother that was speaking was Jamaal Anthony Bowman. He, as he said, is an educator, also a politician. He's the representative of New York's 16th congressional district. He served that district since 2021. And his area of representation or coverage includes much of North Bronx, southern half of Westchester County, including Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and his hometown of Yonkers. And I think you're right, Jonathan, that's appropriate and bold. And I'm glad that we are able to witness what it's like to not be silenced by decorum and protocol and expectations, because clearly those white people there were trying to get him to fall in line and to not say what he felt. Yoji, what are your thoughts? What is your impression?
I was surprised to see. I wasn't aware of this video, but what caught my attention is the extreme emotion of the New York representative, and the disconnection and the apathy of his counterpart. You know, and that resumed to shut him down by walking away, alleging that these guys was screaming, and not seeing that this tone of voice it carry a deep feeling, sorrow, and worry to what is really happening, and and that the solution it is less guns, gonna be less that. It's a no-brainer, you know. And what is shocking, that's actually the word I was looking for today. It was shocking to me to see that, and shocking to see the other guy just walking away and let you know. And then both are representative of our people like us, and the other one not doing his job and engaging in a debate that the Mr. Bowman was looking for, you know, to have a conversation. And also the apathy of the surrounding. Everybody, this woman just passed through, you know, through the middle of the conversation. It's like, but shows, yeah, people are trying to ban books and control how people are thinking while those tragedies is happening daily, you know. And
Jonathan,
how people
how
can
does it,
resist.
how do events like this show up in families and children that you serve? And I'll ask you the same question, Yoji. In the community, when things like this happen, either in Brazil or here or anywhere in the world, what do you perceive to be the impact on ordinary people in general, but on children in particular? I listened to a show on National Public Radio this morning, and they were talking with school psychologists in Nashville and asking them personally how they were handling this information with their children. One of the persons on the show probably had a child that was maybe 13, 14, and a child that was maybe 5 or 6. And she talked about the fact that they don't have a lot of televisions and so or computers in their home that, you know, the children have unlimited access to. And that was a good thing. But she said they do watch the news and discuss the news at breakfast and at dinner every day. And of course, the question of the shooting at the school came up. And so she was discussing how do you separate the information to what's appropriate for the 5-year-old, right? And what's more appropriate for the 13-year-old. And, you know, the 13-year-old has devices and more access and is in an age group where they discuss things like this. And even ask her, could she go to, you know, the school, to the memorial, which she forbade her to go because she thought it wasn't appropriate for her. But what do you think about that, Jonathan? What are you hearing? And I know it's not your students in your school or in your neighborhood, but these are all of our students everywhere around the world, I think. What's your sense?
I'm hearing a lot about is the key piece on this is trauma. This is trauma. So when students and families go through this, it is heartbreaking and it is hard, and that trauma gets carried in and internalized. And so people need resources, they need support, but you can look at the reaction of parents after you validate. What they need is action. They went to the school board meetings, they went to every public meeting, and they were demanding that there be action. And so what is necessary is for there to be resources for people to be able to deal with trauma. But I think we get caught up into this weird place of people not wanting their kids to be exposed to trauma when their kids are being exposed to trauma all the time. And this idea of who's too old or who's too young. We have families that we serve that they have had shootings in the house, where they have had situations where 4 and 5-year-olds have witnessed assaults. They've witnessed that parents being tied up. They've witnessed all sorts of horrendous things. And we work with those families so that we can help them get through that, get them to the proper resources. And when you're talking about a mass shooting that affects a whole community, that affects a whole school, it is heartbreaking that there is not the priority on protecting those families and supporting those families. Meanwhile, you have down in Florida, they're banning schools, banning showing of Ruby Bridges because that's too scary and it has racial slurs in it. I think overall across the country, we're dealing with this thing that as it impacts white people in a negative way, if it makes them uncomfortable, if it makes them scared, if they don't want to talk about it, and especially if it impacts their money, that's where we're seeing the stop measures that prevent us from doing what needs to be done.
Yogi?
Well, I have about 7 kids, and I just have the youngest now in school age. But to all of them, while they're at school, the news about it would cause them great anxiety, and myself as a parent too, of that the possibility that something like this could happen at any moment, because it is spreading to even to places or kind of schools that you would not expect to. But also, I think those kids are responding to stimuli that they do have from society at large. There are micro actions that reflect how, for example, government acts towards other countries or some minorities in their own countries. That is generally in a forceful manner. We are bombarded by words and images that we call the other one warrior or strong this, or strong that. It was a fight. This. So it's the whole society that need to stop. And I think the easiest way it is to not give access to guns as they have. For example, in Brazil, it was the last president that is ally of Trump, which liberalized the ownership of guns. Now the government, because also this phenomenon is replicating here. We have, like a day or two ago, a case of school violence where a teacher got stabbed. That the new government is worried and start a process, one of buying back those guns and already not allowing new permits, and the gun clubs that proliferated here like a plague, and they also fueling not only those domestic violence or cases like kids having access to gun and killing other kids or their parents or themselves by accident, but also here, for example, those gun laws and the relaxation of the gun laws allow that the organized crime have access to guns. If you heard a few days ago, they bust a plan that they have to kidnap simultaneously several authorities here in Brazil in retaliation, how the big bosses of organized crime were being treated in prison. So this problem of violence and access of gun is worldwide, and one of the solutions is restrict access to gun. It's pretty logical. No guns in moments that you have rage. People might resort to the way back, punch and get being punched.
Right.
Because we do all have rage sometimes. But if you have a
Right.
gun and you are unstable, it's a formula to something go very bad.
Let me acknowledge and thank Michelle Madison, who's our regular visitor here. She says that a couple of notes from her. It was very hard dealing with discussing this with her 8-year-old grandson. He heard about it, the mass shooting, through the grapevine. And she said that many of her grandson's classmates are 9 years old. and have been having problems, or she's having problems coping herself with this, with grandchildren at various ages. Michelle, thank you for weighing in for those comments. And then Mike V, always glad that he's following and supporting. And he says, put the responsibility at the foot of Governor Bill Lee because of this constitutional carry bill that allowed for that person to walk in and acquire firearms like they were a Snickers candy bar with no background check. Mike V, thank you for the comment. Please, again, thank you, brother, for weighing in as you always do. Jonathan, another comment. You want to close this part? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Al. So the other piece that I think people aren't really considering around this, the proponents of arming teachers aren't thinking about the fact that, one, when we look at that, like the Buffalo shooting, security guard had a gun, and still that did not stop the shooter. When you're putting teachers in this position, we're already having a whole national conversation about taking the mental health aspect out of policing, pulling that off of policing because we put too much. Those people are trained with guns. They are trained to use them. And now you want to put teachers in that position that we're taking police officers out of. So it doesn't make sense, and it isn't being thought all the way through. And the last point is we don't even talk about how many situations where teachers have been armed and they've mishandled their guns. There are countless situations where they've dropped it. A teacher who dropped the gun out of their waistband when they were doing a cartwheel. They have another one where a kid grabbed the teacher's gun and took it. So that's not even being talked about. How many situations of mishandling have already gone on that could have led to larger incidents? So this is a larger conversation that has to happen with all sides looked at.
Well, Kamau King, who joins us often, talked about in Atlanta, more and more Black people are going to and joining gun clubs and acquiring guns. And so, it seems like two things are happening at the same time. One, we decry the violence and the threat and the potential of violence that guns seem to, aggravate. At the same time, because we have this fear and we want to be safe, and because we don't want to, we see the rest of the world arming, and somewhere within us we're saying, shouldn't we arm as well? Because what we don't want is an Armageddon experience where they decide that today is the day that they're going to, do the job or finish the work or whatever they, we know that they're capable of doing. I mean, they've demonstrated an ability to try to annihilate populations in the past. So it's not far-fetched for us to be concerned about that on the one hand. And is our concern such that it's prudent to be armed, quote unquote, responsibly, or is there another response? Maybe it's not an either or, but is there another response that says without weapons and weaponry, we have to have a strategy and a posture that ensures and guarantees our survival, that mitigates the likelihood of them unleashing terror. And so maybe that's it. That's gun control to get rid of the guns, right? If we can get the guns out of their hands, we'll be safer as well. Well, anyway, let's think about that. Let's go to one more topic, and we can come back to this if you guys want to. I think it's good just to have this free-flowing conversation. Magic Johnson is looking at buying a basketball team. We've got a story out of Afrotech, and it says that Magic Johnson is among a group of investors that submitted a $6 billion bid to purchase I said basketball, what I meant misspoke, the NFL's Washington Commanders football. So the NFL's Washington Commanders are up for sale, and it says one sports legend has joined the ownership group in hopes of landing a stake in the team. So the bid, according to CBS Sports, it involves two groups that have submitted formal bids. including Josh Harris, co-owner of the New Jersey Devils and the Philadelphia 76ers. This billionaire, it says, is not standing alone to land the team. He's tapped Mitchell Rales, who's working with former NBA superstar Magic Johnson to seal the deal. The bid placed by the group meets current owner Dan Snyder's asking price, which is $6 billion. Another bid is led by a Canadian billionaire, Steve Apostolopoulos. That has been submitted. And final note, and I'll have you guys respond to it. The subtitle says NFL Homeownership Dreams. It says that Harris is no stranger to sports ownership. His company is CBS Sports, and it's worth $7.3 billion, and it owns the teams we mentioned earlier, along with the Prudential Center, and he also owns a portion of the Crystal Palace, which is an English soccer club. So the last note says it's worth noting that this is not his first attempt at purchasing an NFL team. He previously partnered with Johnson to try to win the Denver Broncos. What do you guys think? I'm not a sports person, don't follow sports, but this is big money. And what does it mean? What do you think it means? What are your thoughts? You guys, if you're sports guys, let me know. I don't know. Yoji, I know you're a sports guy because you are a sports activist. And what are your thoughts?
Well, but I'm a soccer guy. So I think he should invest his money in soccer.
Real football.
Well, I don't have cause a polemic by calling it real football, but yeah, it's football, And but yeah, I don't have basketball. Doesn't move me much as soccer. I'm a fan of the Minnesota Loom and Sports Club Bahia, but I think it's a good thing that we start to have black ownership in those activities, or black leadership in those activities that are depending on our talents. And the American sports are thrive, and it is a force of revenue for a lot of people on the backs of black talent. So I think he should go for it, and if he's part of a consortium, that he should try to be the leading voice and manage his institution with more justice than generally you see in the professional sport team.
Jonathan, what do you think?
I'm not really that big a sports person, except for that hockey now. The Minnesota Wild, I've really been, getting into them, and they come over and volunteer and help out at the center. So I like people like that. What this always brings me around to is what I could do with $6 billion. $6 billion. It boggles my mind how much money is into an entertainment franchise like this, because we could wipe out hunger in the Twin Cities with $6 billion. We could go ahead and make sure that every child in St. Paul and Minneapolis could go to college.
But if you did that, could you produce a profit for the owner of the capital? That's the question.
That's the whole thing there.
And is there more profit in keeping all the children in a position of need and in a position of exclusion, and keeping the access to wealth and power as a very, very thin and narrow pipeline? That's the question.
And that gets back to how our system has been set up. It has not been set up since since colonizers arrived on these shores, stole the land, and stole people to go ahead and create systems that keep people in poverty. And it's almost like laughing in the face to be waving around $6 billion contracts while there are people who are hungry at night, or people who can't afford a place to live. So I know we're going to talk about reparations, but this is just, when I look at those numbers, I'm like, do you realize how much good could be done that doesn't have to do with entertainment?
Well, let's shift to the question of reparations. And there's an article in Insight News on our website, insightnews.com today. It's a piece written by Associated Press writer Janie, I think it's Jane Har. And the article is headlined, Reparations for Black Californians could top $800 billion. And I'll read a couple of paragraphs. It says it could cost California more than $800 billion to compensate Black residents for generations of over-policing, of disproportionate incarceration, and housing discrimination. Economists have told a state panel considering reparations. The preliminary estimate is more than 2.5 times California's $300 billion annual budget, and does not include a recommended $1 million per older Black resident for health disparities that have shortened their average lifespan. Nor does that figure count compensating people for property unjustly taken by the government or devaluing Black businesses. Two other harms the task force says the state perpetuated. Well, let me stop there, and we can come back and read more of it as we go along. But Jonathan, weigh in on that. What is your discussion, your thoughts? What arguments do you hear pro and con on reparations in general, and this discussion in California in particular?
I'll say about darn time just to start off. So we get into reparations becomes another one of those thorny subjects. Once you start talking about racism, reparations, or anything having to do with critical race theory, suddenly it becomes this weird thing of mostly white people being like, I didn't own slaves, I didn't have it. And people do not understand how deep the both the trauma, but the impact goes. It's not about the idea of just money. It's about the idea of what was lost. It's about the idea of what came out of that. And California is a really interesting place to start with this, because their first governor was Peter Burnett, did a whole bunch of things that I think people don't understand. I mean, California was coming in as a free state, but there were a lot of maneuvers to get Black and brown people out of the state. He's also responsible for penning Oregon's Lash Law, which went ahead and said that when Oregon became a state, free Black people had to leave within 3 years. Otherwise, they would go ahead and be whipped publicly. And any slave would be freed within 3 years if their owners didn't leave, and then they'd be whipped. But in California, they went ahead and put in different kind of measures to try to restrict the movement, to go ahead and harm Native Americans, Chinese exclusion laws. There's a whole bunch that goes in. So there's definitely a basis for this. This makes sense. It's going to be hard for people to swallow, but I think the end of your article actually makes a great point that this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end.
Yoji, what do you think about the question of reparations?
I think it is about time to start putting in action. We've been hearing for a long time about the reparation. It seems that once more California is going to take the lead about putting in practice. To me, it's really a turning point. The admission by the state of the need of this reparation, and I hope this movement go worldwide, right? For example, in Brazil and everywhere that our diaspora is present. And again, I think it's long overdue. Everybody else that were wronged or perceived to be wronged by government historically has got some form of reparation, right? So the Nazis, the Jews, The Japanese got interned. So it's time for Black people to be recognized that it is needed this reparation because of this proportional suffering that we do go through throughout the Americas, throughout the world since the event of slavery took place. So I wish that I can include myself in that in that reparation, but no. Seriously, it's long overdue, and generally, California acts first and kind of encourage the other states to follow through, and hopefully, I think this assignment should be of the federal government as well of the other actors that are still around that participated on the slave trade. Like for example, some of the families are paying reparations to people in Barbados and in Bermudas. So it should be a worldwide consortium. The government of England, the royal family of England, all of them should atone and contribute to funds of reparation. The government of France, for example, the case of Haiti, it is needed reparations too, So yeah, long due, welcome that arrived.
Well, Mike V again put a note we had up a minute ago saying that German millennials today, who obviously did not participate in the Holocaust, but you don't hear them complaining about paying reparations to Jewish people, as they recognize it as the state that wronged Jewish people, and therefore they acknowledge the value of the debt. Speaking of the debt, when they acknowledge that Randall Robinson, who wrote that book, The Debt, died. Jonathan, if you read the book, why don't you take a minute and talk about Randall Robinson and the book, The Debt, what it meant to spur the discussion about reparations, to normalize it in the Black community. Because if you recall, I'd say 15, 20 years ago, if one of us brought up reparations, we'd get side-eye look from anybody, they don't know us anything, or they would tell us, we don't owe you anything. The former director of the Urban League and I, when I was on his board, met with the chairman of the Hennepin County Commissioners, and unsolicited, and out of nowhere, maybe he was thinking about the investments that the county has made in North Minneapolis, a Black community, where I'm at right now. And he said, well, I didn't grow up here, and I certainly wasn't around generations ago. And, I think we're putting enough money into North Minneapolis already. And you can't hold us accountable for all the stuff that happened years ago. So this is like, for me, that's guilt talking, guilt leading the conversation, because he wasn't even approached on that. We were there on another mission. But that's kind of how they have wired themselves to be way in advance of any discussion of accountability. They want to chop the discussion. That's what's happening with the textbook question, right? And the schools question and the CRT question. Don't expose our children to our dastardly deeds, because it might hurt their feelings. If they can shut the conversation down early, they evade the accountability, the reckoning that surely must come. Let me say this. I had Randall Robinson in our program, on this program. I can't remember when it was, maybe a couple of, must have been a dozen years ago. It was a predecessor to this program. We used to call this the Insight KMOJ Public Policy Forum at Lucille's Kitchen in North Minneapolis. And we have weekly meetings, live broadcast on KMOJ and on KFAI. And local people, national, international, all come through. And we're in a partnership with, I think it was maybe TPT, Twin Cities Public Television, and the Star Tribune, sponsoring this forum where Randall Robinson talked about his book, The Debt, and the whole concept of reparations. But his talk was preceded by an interview done by Grant Williams. You might recognize Grant. He's an editor over at Minnesota Public Radio. He was the executive editor of Insight News. Insight sent Grant to Berlin I think to Berlin or to Bonn, to Germany, to interview leaders of the Jewish movement for reparations. And they were at a point where the country and major industries were negotiating how much they had stolen and how the state had been actually the perpetrator of the theft of life and liberty and property of Jewish people. And the state therefore had an obligation to restore, repair the damage. And we simply morphed that conversation when we had that interview. It was a live satellite connection with Germany. And then we turned it to Randall. So what are we talking about for Black Americans? The theft of life, of labor, of property, and the denial of opportunity. And that set the stage for his pointing out and teaching and telling that this question of reparations is one that we ought to be having and that we can have, and we cannot let them dissuade us because they did the damage. So, Jonathan, if you want to talk a little bit about the book, if you know. If you
Yeah, and I think Randall was perfect in how he set the stage with that, in going ahead and drawing on the economics and the facts of the matter. There's this broad misconception that somehow reparations means that people are paying out of their pocket, or we're taking money from them to give to Black and brown people. And realistically, what we're looking at is the same thing that we do for funding any program. It goes into the government budget. It goes into the taxes that pay for the different things that are going on. And so Randall went ahead and laid a great foundation in The Debt. It's a great read. But he drew on facts. He drew on numbers. He drew on things that you could not dispute. And that's the reason I think there's so much opposition to this, is because then we actually have to look at our history. Then we actually have to pay attention to what has happened. That's why you're seeing books banned in Florida. That's why you're seeing people now wanting to talk about critical race theory and trying to pretend that it's actually being taught in schools. It's all about the history of this country and the true facts that they don't understand and don't want known.
Gentlemen, we're out of time. Great conversation. Thank you once again for being here, Jonathan. Thank you, Yoji Sana. I'm Al
Thank you so
McFarlane.
much.
This is The Conversation with Al McFarlane. We will see you tomorrow. Take care.
Yes.